Hey there,
Okay.
everyone. Hello, everybody. I think I'm live. Let me just make sure that YouTube is telling me I'm live before I start talking to you. But I do believe we are good to go. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to today's live class. This is Top 5 Tips for Perfect Rhythm and Stress. And I'm so excited to have you guys join me. And we have a lot of content to cover today, so I hope that we will get through everything. Let me get my notes going. So today's live stream will take about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So I hope that I will stick within that time frame. And while you're here, let me get this going so I can see who is here. Let's see. For some reason, I can't see my chat box for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. But go ahead and put into the chat who you are and where you're from. And let me know one thing that you hope to learn in today's live stream. So that way I can make sure I can address things as we go. And just so you know that there are videos on every topic that I'll discuss today. So I have videos on my YouTube channel and on my website. If you have questions about any of the things that we discuss, my website is a little bit more helpful because it has every video that's on my YouTube channel, but also you have the transcript of what I say directly there below that video. So you can go ahead and read through the transcript and search through the transcript to find something that to find an answer for you. But so that being said, let's jump in and make sure that we can get through everything today. Okay, so let me get to the next slide as well. Hold on one second. Okay. So before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone knows who I am. So my name is Julie Cunningham, and this might be the first time that you'll have met me, or maybe you know who I am from my earlier videos. But I am a professional American accent coach and a voice coach, and I own a company called San Diego Voice and Accent. And I work with people just like you who are trying to improve their American English skills. Now, I work with native speakers and non-native speakers on their pronunciation, their vocal delivery, their vocal style. We work on a little bit of everything. And I can do, so you found me here on YouTube. So you see that I publish videos on American pronunciation as well as voice and public speaking. I also work one-on-one with students if they want private lessons, and I have an online training platform called English Pro that's kind of a hybrid of online training plus live classes with me, and I work with people and help them as well through those classes. And you can find out more information if you're interested in learning more about me and what I do. You can find out more information in the links below. So yes, this is live, and so if you're joining me right now, thank you so much for joining me. The replay will be published on my YouTube channel today under the live tab for anybody who wants to watch the replay. If you have questions, we will have time for a Q&A section at the end of today's class, and I'll open up the Q&A in the chat. I'll figure out how to get to it and open up that Q&A section in the chat. And then once it's open and ready, you can type your questions in there. When the Q&A is over and I shut the Q&A down, all of your questions will be deleted. So if I'm not able to answer your question today or have time to get to it, or you think of another question later on, please add a comment to this video below once it's been published, and I'll answer your questions there in the comments. Now, I also want to make sure that everybody knows about my free guidebook to the sounds of American English. And if you have registered for today's class, then you've already received an email that has the download link right there in the email. But in case you didn't get the email, or in case you are watching the replay, you can get the link down in the description below. But I also want to show you what's included in this guidebook, because it's a wonderful resource. It's a great tool to help anybody improve their pronunciation skills, and I want you to have it because it's free. So here's a quick video of kind of what you can expect in the guidebook. So you'll learn how to pronounce every sound of American English, every consonant, every vowel, with pictures and IPA charts, MRIs, symbols, as well as practice words, and the audio as well. Those little icons, the little audio icons allow you to click there and you can play the audio. So it's a PDF that you can download, and you'll get the link to download that below. So please check that out. Make sure you take advantage of that free resource because it's a fabulous resource for you. All right, so now as we get started with the content, I do have to say there's one rule. So I'm going to talk about rules and guidelines, and then how to break those rules. But there is one rule that really is true all the time. There are no hard and fast rules when it comes to stress. So that means I can't tell you, 100% of the time, native speakers will always use this stress and rhythm pattern, always. No, because there's going to be lots of variation, and there's going to be lots of times when native speakers deviate from that typical stress pattern for good reasons. So in this class, we'll talk about the typical stress and rhythm patterns that a speaker is most likely to use in a typical conversation. But please remember, a speaker can decide to stress any word in a sentence depending on the message they want to convey. And we'll talk about that, times when you will also want to deviate from typical stress patterns in order to emphasize certain words, because that's what native speakers are doing, and so you should be doing it too. So you'll learn about that later on in the class. Okay, so let's jump into the first stress tip. So tip number 1 is about content words versus function words. So if you've been studying English pronunciation for a while, you might already know what a content word is and what a function word is. So if that's the case, it's always good to review information. Or maybe this is new for you and you're just learning what content words and function words are, or you've never heard of them before. So this information is going to be very, very valuable. And it's so valuable that I have several slides on this right here, because this is the foundation. This is what dictates stress in spoken English. Is it a content word or a function word? That's the very foundation. So you must learn the differences between these two words and then kind of what happens to them in spoken English. So let me just read what content words are to you. So content words are words that convey the meaning or the main content of the sentence. You need content words for your sentence to make sense. Content words are typically stressed in sentences because they are the most important to the message. So you have, here's a nice table that shows you categories of content words, a description of what they are, and then gives you some examples. So you'll see that it's nouns, main verbs, adjectives, adverbs, WH words, negatives. So these are the words that carry the meaning. If all you have is, if all you can gather from a person, all you hear, they just give you content words, you're probably going to understand what they're trying to tell you because they're giving you the words that contain the meaning of the sentence. So these are the words that are, most important, so they get the most stress. Now we have function words. So function words carry the grammar of the sentence. You need function words for your sentence to be grammatically correct. Function words are typically unstressed and sometimes reduced in sentences. Now you'll learn about about reductions in the next tip, so you'll learn about that later on in this class. But really, just understand these are your typical function words in American English, and they're going to be unstressed typically. So you'll see the categories there. auxiliary verbs, prepositions, conjunctions, determiners, pronouns. Now, you might not know what all of those groups of words contain, so you don't have to necessarily memorize them, but these are the words that are the grammar of the sentence, and they're typically really short words. You know, you can look here in the examples: are, was, has, could, should, at, on, to, near, I, it, we, they, he, she. So that should give you an idea. Okay, yes, these are those function words. They're the grammar of the sentence. They're less important to the meaning of the sentence. And these are the words that are going to be typically de-stressed and sometimes reduced. So this slide I really like because this shows you why it's so important to understand content words and function words in spoken English, so you can get the idea, really, that this is what's happening when native speakers are talking. Native speakers are reducing and de-stressing those function words, and that's why their speech has that rhythm, and they're doing that probably more than you are. They're not stressing words more, they're de-stressing the function words more than you, and that's what's helping their speech to kind of have that rhythm. So when you de-stress a function word and or reduce the vowel in that function word, it allows you to say the same amount of syllables in a shorter amount of time. So this is a great example of what that looks like. Here you'll see there are two kind of graphs that I've gotten from the program called Audacity. It's an audio recording software program. And this is what it looks like when I said these sentences. Here's sentence number 1 and sentence number 2. So right away you can see sentence number 1 is a little bit taller, there's like bigger peaks, and it's longer than sentence number 2. All right, there's a reason for that. Sentence number 1 is made up of 8 syllables. That's the same as sentence number 2. Also 8 syllables. So you would think both of those sentences would be the same amount of time. But that's not the case when you're saying them out loud. Sentence number 1 is all content words, 6 content words. And it took me 2.8 seconds to say this sentence. Okay, so it sounds like this. Julie cooked 5 large brown turkeys. Da 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 da. Okay, 6 content words, 8 syllables, 2.8 seconds. Sentence number 2 is also 8 syllables, but only has 3 content words. And it took me half the amount of time, 1.4 seconds. And this sentence sounds like, she cooked a turkey for dinner. She cooked a turkey for dinner. So hopefully you can hear sentence number 2 took me much less time to say. You also heard certain peaks in my voice. You could hear that cooked, turkey, and dinner, those are your 3 content words, and those kind of had some stress, some peaks in my voice. And the words she, and for, those were reduced and definitely lower in pitch, unstressed. So again, this is a great example of what it looks like when you have all content words and then a sentence that has some function words, and really what's happening to the length of that sentence. Sentence number 1 is naturally going to be longer because they're all content words. Sentence number 2 now has some function words that are going to be smushed and said faster. So again, this is so vital to having good stress and good rhythm, understanding how to de-stress those function words. That's the most important thing. Okay, so now we're going to do some practice, and I want to give you some guidelines that you can follow. Again, these are guidelines, not necessarily rules, right? Because native speakers are going to break these rules whenever they need to. But this is what you can follow if you're wondering, okay, I want to say this sentence, or I'm going to read this sentence. How do I know which word or words to stress? Okay, so you can, number 1, de-stress the function words and then reduce the vowels if possible. All right, so we've already talked about that, what that means, and you'll learn more about vowel reductions coming up next. Then number 2, pick just one content word as the focus of each phrase and give it the most stress. So many sentences are going to have more than just one content word. Okay, but you're probably not going to stress every single content word. You might. You're going to have one that contains the most stress, and then the other content words maybe have secondary stress or no stress at all. It depends on the message. This is where you get that variability between speakers and the context of the conversation and the meaning that that speaker wants to convey. But these are great guidelines. It's a great place to start if you're practicing stress and rhythm and just not sure how to do it. Follow these guidelines. And again, we'll practice that next. Okay, so here you have 3 sentences, and I want you to decide which words could potentially be stressed in these sentences. So I'm asking you to identify the content words, right? Because content words are the words that are typically going to be stressed in a sentence. So take a look at these sentences. I'll give you about 30 seconds, maybe a minute to look through them, and I'll give you the answers next. Here, if you're not quite sure what a content word is, here's that table that will show you what content words are. So I'm going to take a drink of water while you identify the content words of these sentences. All right, a few more seconds. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time for you to identify the content words of these sentences. Here's the answer. All right, so I've shown you the content words here in this kind of orangey pink coral font. So in sentence number 1, your content words are want, go, and walk. Sentence number 2, haven't watched movie. In sentence number 3, Susan likes play basketball tall. Okay, so those are your content words. Those are your nouns, your main verbs, adjectives, negatives, WH words if there weren't any there, but if there were, that might have been a content word. So now we know which words could be stressed. Okay, so now we're going to have to think, okay, let's apply those guidelines. We're not going to stress every content word. We want this to be a little bit more natural. So in the next slide, you're going to see an example of what typical intonation and stress and rhythm would look like, applying those guidelines. And then I'll read the sentences to you so you can hear how I'm actively applying those guidelines. So the instructions say, apply the stress guidelines to these sentences. And I've already done that for you. But here here's the guidelines for you right there. So sentence number 1, I looked at that, and as the speaker, I decided, okay, I'm going to stress the word walk the most. Now let me just show you one thing. If you look at the sentences, walk, movie, and tall, they're all in uppercase, and they're all in that coral font color. So that means those are the words that I've selected, the content words, to be stressed the most. And what typically happens in American English is it's the final content word of a phrase or sentence that will receive the most stress. That's typically what happens. You're going to get a little peak, a little pop in your stress there at the very end of your thought group or phrase. So indeed, that's what's happened here. These words are the final content words of each phrase, and I've decided to stress those the most. The words go, haven't, Susan, basketball, those are all content words, and I decided, okay, I'm still going to stress those words, but they're not going to have the most stress. They're going to have secondary stress. So they're not in capitals, but they're still in that orangey coral color to help them stand out. Now, some words have this little yellow line through them. That's to show the function words that I've decided to reduce. Okay, so when I read these sentences, you'll hear these words as being reduced. And then if there's just a word that doesn't have anything done to it, it's just in the normal white font, those are words that I'm not stressing at all. I'm not doing anything to them. All right, so this is how I've decided as the speaker to apply the guidelines, following the guidelines. This is what the sentences sound like. So I'll read them to you at my normal pace, and then I'll read them a little slower so you can actually hear the reductions that are happening. I want to go for a walk. I want to go for a walk. Now slower. I want to go for a walk. I want to go. Wanna. I didn't say want to. I said wanna. And then go had a little pop in stress. I want to go for a. I reduced both of those words. They're both function words. I did not say for a. I want to go for a walk. For a. It's really hard to do. I reduced them and linked them together and said furra. I want to go for a walk. Now you can hear how walk has that little pop in my pitch. It's a little bit louder, a little bit longer. And by the way, that is how you show stress in spoken English. You make a word longer in duration, a little bit louder in volume, and or the pitch of your voice goes up a little bit. Those are 3 ways to show stress. The words that are unstressed, you'll do the opposite. They're going to be lower in pitch, softer, and faster in duration. So that's why the words for a, they didn't sound like that. I pronounced them like furra. And the word walk had that pop. Walk had the stress. Furra was unstressed and reduced. Here's sentence number 2. We haven't watched that movie yet. We haven't watched that movie yet. We haven't watched that movie yet. So you can hear the pitch of my voice kind of following. Haven't and movie had the higher pitch, longer in duration, and probably a little louder. The other words were lower, unstressed, and the word that was probably reduced to maybe that, something really short. Sentence number 3. Susan likes to play basketball because she is tall. Susan likes to play basketball because she is tall. Okay, very typical stress and rhythm. So you hear Susan, basketball, and tall as the words that have some of the stress, Tall was the focus word of that thought group, and so it had maybe the most. I reduced the word to. Susan likes to play. Susan likes to play. I reduced it there. Susan likes to. I didn't say to. I changed the vowel to the schwa vowel. That's how I reduced that word, and you'll learn that next. And then the other words, maybe there were some reductions here, but they were definitely not stressed. All right, so I hope that gives you just a good foundation about what's happening when native speakers are using these typical stress patterns, how they're selecting, one content word to have the most stress, and then the other content words, it depends. It depends on the speaker and kind of what they want to do with their message. But definitely, it's more important, pay attention to how you're unstressing, de-stressing function words, and then reducing them if possible. That's probably what's missing in your speech. Yes, rhythm tip number 2. All right, so now let's move on to a tip about rhythm and reductions. English rhythm comes from a play between stress and reductions of function words. So we already kind of just talked about that, but I haven't given you a good definition of a reduction and any examples. So that's what this table is here to show you. Here you have the function word. Okay, so these are just some of the most common reductions of function words in American English. There are more. More words will be reduced in spoken English, but here are some of the most common words that you can get started with learning about. So this has the middle column here says citation or full form. This is the IPA transcription of this word, how it's pronounced when it's fully pronounced with no reductions. Okay, so this is the full, unreduced pronunciation of the function words. But here's the reduced form. So this is typically how native speakers are going to pronounce these words in spoken English when they reduce the words. So this is probably what you need to learn. You already know the citation form because the word to is always going to be spelled T-O, and you've learned it as to. The word for, the spelling is always going to stay the same. For is always spelled F-O-R. And this is the pronunciation, for. But this word is so commonly reduced in spoken English, typically native speakers are pronouncing it like this, fur. They're not saying for. They're changing that vowel to a vowel that is faster to say, fur. That's the reduction. A vowel there from the citation form, the vowel or consonant is changing to something different, another vowel that's faster and easier to say. So that's going to help with that rhythm, right? If you're reducing that vowel, automatically that vowel will be shorter. Now you're going to have better rhythm because you don't have to take the time to pronounce this full long vowel. It's going to be a shorter vowel. So I'll read these to you very quickly so you can hear the citation versus the reduced form. And I want you also to pay attention if you notice any patterns in the pronunciation of the reduced forms. Okay? So here's the function word to. The citation form is to, but it reduces to ta. For reduces to fur. Have reduces to of or a. Can reduces to kun, kin, or kun. Maybe just the K sound and the N sound. No vowel at all. Kun. That's the word can many times in sentences. Again, one other thing, reductions only happen in spoken English, and they only happen when you're linking these function words to something else. If you showed me this word can by itself and you said, say this word, how do you pronounce this word? I'm going to give you this pronunciation, can. So a word by itself is typically going to be spoken as a stressed word. I'm going to give you that full pronunciation. But the minute you put that word into a sentence, now the pronunciation might change because you have rhythm happens in a sentence. Rhythm happens and reductions happen in phrases and sentences. And we'll practice that coming up. The word and is typically reduced to un or n. Or can reduce to er. Of can reduce to a. Do can reduce to da. Your can reduce to your. You can reduce to ya. Him can reduce to im. And also I forgot to add that on this chart. Im, So do you notice any patterns there in the pronunciation of the reduced forms? I'll give you the answer coming up next. All right, so here are the patterns that you might notice when you're reducing words. Most vowels reduce to either the schwa, or the short I as in bit vowel. But if it's an R-colored vowel, it reduces to er, er. Just the R sound, that unstressed vowel. Basically, it's just the R sound. So here's an example of number 1. We have to, the oo vowel reduces to the schwa, Here's an example of number 2. We have or, which is an R-colored vowel, reducing to er. Number 3 says, final consonants are sometimes dropped, especially in the words and, have, and of. So some of this has to do with the rule of 3 as well. Now, if you don't know the rule of 3, take a look at my YouTube channel for videos about the rule of 3, or go to my website and look for the rule of 3, and you'll learn more about it. But this one basically says that when in spoken English, when you have 3 consonants that appear in a row, that middle consonant can be dropped from the pronunciation. So the word and, if you're looking at it, it has an N and a D consonant. It already has 2 consonants there at the end. So if you're linking the word and to another word that begins with a consonant, which is really common to do in spoken English, that D sometimes can be dropped. Macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese. Most native speakers are not going to say macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese. They're going to drop that D because you're linking the word and to a CH consonant, which is a consonant. You can drop that D. So that's kind of what's happening here with and, have, and of, or it could just be the phrase is just, you know, instead of want, sort of. I sort of want to go to the store. Sort of. Okay, that's the word of. But I could just say sorta. I sorta want to go to the store. Sorta. Sorta. I just drop that final in of and pronounce it as the schwa. That's just the phrase. That's just the informal contraction that happens there. And number 4, pronouns sometimes drop the initial consonant H and TH. So that's very common with words like him, her, his, he, and them. And this is one area where a lot of my students are hesitant to use a pronoun reduction, or they're just not quite sure how to do it. They don't want to do it, but I promise you, if you listen to the speech of native speakers, even in my speech today, I will drop that initial H or TH lots of times when using pronouns, and it depends on what you're linking it to. So there are some rules about how to do this, which you can learn about in a video if you look for pronoun reductions on my channel. But the point is, it's very common, this type of reduction, and you're never going to see it in the spelling, right? If you're reading English, him is always spelled H-I-M. But if you're listening to the native speaker and listening to what they're saying, lots of times they're going to drop that H and just pronounce it as im. Give him a ride. Give him a ride. Give him a ride to school. Give him. Give him. Not give him. Give him. Give him. Give him a ride. Right? It's just so natural for a native speaker to drop that H to help that link be a little bit more smooth. So pay attention to those pronoun reductions. That could be one way to help your speech sound more natural and give you just this nice kind of rhythm that maybe you're missing. All right, so I do want to spend a little bit of time here on these 2 words, can versus can't. Let me just take a quick sip of water. Okay, because I get asked about these 2 words quite a bit, and for good reason, because these 2 words can be very confusing to hear the difference between them, right? Even for native speakers, they struggle sometimes hearing the difference between can and can't. Now, if that happens to you and you're not sure what the person said, it's always okay to ask. Did you say can or can't? Okay, so when you're asking for clarification, you're going to use the citation, the full pronunciation. Did you say can or can't? You're going to be very deliberate with your pronunciation when you're asking for that clarification. And your speaking partner will most likely respond also with the citation form. I said can, and they're going to be very clear about it to make sure that there's no confusion. So that's completely fine to do. But here are some things that you can remember when you're in the moment and pronouncing these sentences and these words and these sentences. This is kind of how these words play out when you think about rhythm, stress, and reductions, and this is how they sound different. So again, you have your citation form here, and you have your reduced forms. So first of all, notice that the word can be reduced. It's got a vowel reduction that happens there. The word can't typically does not have a vowel reduction. It maintains the a as an apple vowel. Now you might have some changes to that final T sound. It might be pronounced with the glottal stop, or it might be dropped completely, but that vowel will be maintained as a, the regular vowel, whereas can is going to reduce. So let me show you how that happens. You have two sentences here. I can go to the party. I can't go to the party. Okay, the only difference there, the words can and can't. So when I read these sentences, this is how they're going to sound. Now the key difference is, this is what makes them different. The word can, the vowel will be reduced, and therefore the word will be shorter in duration. And you can also hear the stress. Since can is reduced, it's not stressed. Okay, so here I'm showing you the stress with the capital letters, and then this kind of orangey color. So can is going to be reduced and not stressed. Okay, that's going to be the opposite for the word can't. Can't, there's no vowel reduction, and it's stressed. Okay, so let me read these two sentences to you so you can hear the difference in vowel reductions, duration of the words, and the stress pattern. I can go to the party. I can go to the party. I can go. I can. Unstressed, reduced, and go had the stress, and also party. Now the other sentence. I can't go to the party. I can't go to the party. I can't go. Can't. Had the a vowel. There was no vowel reduction there, and it had stress. So that is typically, this is what's happening between these two words. But again, if you are still confused, you didn't understand the person, or they didn't understand you, it's always okay to ask for clarification. Native speakers have to do that sometimes too. And again, you would just say, did you say can or can't? Very clearly, full pronunciation there, and then the person will respond probably with the same type of pronunciation to make sure that there's no confusion. But I hope you can hear the difference, or that you heard the difference in the stress pattern and the reductions there. And that's how these words are typically pronounced in sentences. All right, so moving on to stress tip number 3. So native speakers often break these rules or guidelines when shifting the stress for emphasis, and you should do that too. So here's, so far we've talked about, here are some rules, some guidelines to help you understand stress and rhythm in American English. Follow these guidelines, pick one content word, the other words are de-stressed, de-stress your function words, reduce them. All right, here's where you break those rules, right? They're just guidelines, really. And one reason why native speakers do that is for dynamic emphasis. So this is when you're shifting stress to make your speech more exciting and easier to understand. This is just happening all the time when native speakers are talking, and they are not even noticing it. It's very natural to them. But for you as a non-native speaker, you might not understand the rules about stress or how to shift it. And also in maybe your native language, there's another way to show emphasis in a sentence. You might, in your native language, you might actually change the word order, and that's how you indicate emphasis in a sentence. But American English doesn't work that way. It maintains the same word order, but speakers now just kind of shift the stress to the other word. They make that word or syllable higher in pitch, longer in volume, and louder. and then they de-stress the other words. So I'll demonstrate kind of what this can sound like using this paragraph here about social media. So I'm just going to read the first sentence to you using typical intonation, typical stress, typical rhythm, okay? Social media connects people, provides access to information, and offers networking opportunities. Okay, nothing special about that sentence, very typical. Now I'm going to shift the stress to a word. I want you to listen for the word that you hear me stress the most, and I'll tell you why I did it next. But just listen, I'm going to shift the stress for emphasis, and I want you to identify the word that has the most stress. Social media connects people, provides access to information, and offers networking opportunities. Okay, I felt like I stressed the word "and" the most. Now, why would I do that? The word "and" is a function word, and I just told you, you de-stress function words, reduce them, and the word "and" is often reduced to just a, and that D goes away. But I did not do that. I stressed "and" on purpose. As the speaker, I wanted to highlight all the things that social media can do, all the number of things. It does one thing, it does another thing, and it does a third thing. So I wanted to highlight the number of things, and I made that decision as the speaker. So there you go. I broke those rules and obviously stressed a function word. And that's completely appropriate depending on, what I wanted to convey in that when I spoke. And so again, native speakers are doing this throughout their speech, and it just takes you to kind of listen to it and identify it. And, if you can hear, you have a recording of a native speaker and they're shifting the stress around and you hear them stress the word "and," or they stress the word "to," or the word "for," or these, "it," these little function words, play it back and try to understand, if you can identify why they did that. There's a reason for it, because that's a very obvious shift in the stress to a function word. They've done it for a reason. And then you can start to identify it and imitate it as well. Okay, and here are some other times when you might want to shift the stress when you're responding to a question. Okay, so this again is something that's very natural for native speakers to do, but as a non-native speaker, you might have to actively practice this exact skill. So I'll read this sentence to you right here, and I'll give you the typical stress pattern. So you'll see the words drove and morning have that orangey coral color. So those are the two content words that I feel are going to be stressed in this typical sentence, and the word morning is going to have the most stress because that's my final content word of the sentence, and this is just typical stress patterns, okay? I drove to work this morning. I drove to work this morning. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I drove to work this morning. Okay, so drove and mourn of morning had the stress. So now here's where the stress might shift. If person A asks me this question, where did you drive to work this morning? My response would be, I drove to work this morning. So obviously the word work now has the most stress, and the word morning was not stressed. The word drove was not stressed. They didn't ask me when, they asked me where. So I had to give them a clarification answer. Oh, where did I drive? I drove to work this morning. So in response to their question, I changed I shifted the stress for emphasis. Maybe this question gets asked. Did you walk to work this morning? No, I drove to work this morning. Okay, so now drove obviously has the stress, but work and morning were unstressed, and maybe some other reductions were happening there. But you can hear how I shifted the stress from this typical pattern depending to the other words, depending on the question that was asked. Here are some other reasons to shift the stress for emphasis. If you're expressing disagreement, okay, so person A says, basketball is the most popular sport. So maybe you heard basketball and popular as having the stress, but then person B says, I think football is the most popular sport. Now the word popular didn't have stress at all, and I shifted it to just football. Football is the word that stood out, okay, because I'm disagreeing with person A. Now, if you want to express agreement, you can do it this way. This sentence here. Chocolate tastes delicious. And if I want to agree with you, I'm going to say, yes, chocolate does taste delicious. Now I've added the auxiliary verb does, and that's the verb that gets the stress. It does taste delicious. Now that's a grammatical thing that happens in English, but you can hear how I've shifted the stress from delicious to the word does, because I'm agreeing with you. Now if I'm offering new information, I might shift the stress as well. So the first sentence is, I bought a computer. So you hear computer having some stress. Now if I add new information and I tell you the type of computer or the brand that I bought a computer, a Mac computer. Mac computer. Now Mac had the stress and computer was not stressed because the new information is Mac. You already know it's a computer, but you don't know the brand. Now I've told you. And also contrastive stress. She can't sing well, but she can dance. Okay, so there I've stressed to can, the function word can. This second part of the sentence, typical intonation might be, but she can dance. But she can dance. Can would be unstressed, reduced, and dance would have the stress. But I'm contrasting it with this first part of the sentence. So the emphasis, the stress is different. She can't sing well, but she can dance. Now the word can is stressed and is said for its full citation form, and the word dance is unstressed. So there are some very concrete examples of when native speakers are going to shift the stress depending on questions that are asked of them, or just to be a more dynamic speaker, to highlight certain information, and it's happening all the time in native speakers. All right, let's keep on moving through to the next tip, rhythm tip number 4. Now there's a lot of text on this slide, so I'm just going to read the slide to you so you can hear me say it, and that will help with your comprehension. But it's important to know that other words besides function words can also be reduced in spoken English. And this process is called vowel syncopy. Syncopy. So that's the technical name for this process. And what it is, again, there's a video of vowel syncopy on my YouTube channel and also my website. If you're confused about, you've never heard this term before, or you're not sure what I'm talking about, we'll practice it now. But here's what it is. Vowel syncopy is a process that occurs in spoken language, not written language. It refers to when an unstressed vowel is dropped from the pronunciation of a word. So again, it has to do with stress. It's an unstressed vowel that over time, that pronunciation has changed to where native speakers are actively dropping that vowel from the pronunciation. Not the spelling, right? The spelling is always maintained the same, but the pronunciation will change over time. And that's what's happening to words that follow these rules of vowel syncope pronunciation. An unstressed vowel is being dropped from the pronunciation. Why does this happen? It relates to something called the sonority sequencing principle. So it's too complicated to really discuss in today's class, but you can learn more about it on Wikipedia, or if you Google it, you can learn more about what that is. And when does it happen? So that's pretty much what you want to know. When should you be using this? So unfortunately, there are no concrete rules that say vowel syncope will occur 100% of the time in these contexts. So native speakers can decide. Some words will almost always follow vowel syncope, and we'll talk about that group of words. Some group of words, it can go either way. So I can't tell you, oh, 100% of the time, always pronounce it this way. Now, there's a few words that follow under that category. But these three things will always be true. When vowel syncope occurs in that pronunciation, it's always going to be the dropped vowel will be in the middle of the word, not at the beginning or end. So it's going to be an unstressed vowel in the middle of a word. The dropped vowel will always be unstressed. So you're never going to drop a stressed syllable, right? Stressed syllables are always pronounced. It's these unstressed syllables that things happen to them. And when you drop the vowel, a syllable is also dropped from the pronunciation. So a word might go from 4 syllables to only 3 syllables once you drop that unstressed syllable. So let's practice that now. So there are 2 main groups of words that follow the vowel syncope rule. Group number 1 is when the vowel is almost always dropped. So I'm going to show you 12 words, and you'll see some of these words are quite common, and you're probably already using the vowel syncope pronunciation. But I want to point out, that's great, but notice that there's a vowel that's missing. There's a vowel in the spelling that's not being pronounced, and you'll think, oh yeah, that's right, but that's just how you learned it. You didn't really even know that's what was happening. But here's group number 1. So these are words that are common, and it's very common for native speakers to drop that unstressed syllable. Number 1, chocolate. So I've highlighted in red in the spelling, so you can see where that vowel syncope is occurring. But chocolate is a 2-syllable word. This second part shows you the phonetic transcription. This is what it sounds like when I pronounce it, chocolate. And this is the IPA transcription, chocolate. So no one says chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. Not in American English. In American English, it's 99.9% of the time, this word will be chocolate. 2 syllables. Number 2, vegetables. Vegetables, 3 syllables. It's not vegetable, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's vegetables, 3 syllables. That is 99.9% of the time how it is pronounced. Evening, not evening, even though that's how it looks when it's spelled. It's not pronounced that way. Evening. Number 4, aspirin, not aspirin. It's not 3 syllables, it's 2 syllables. Aspirin. Number 5, temperature. Not temperature. It's not 4 syllables, it's 3 syllables. Temperature. Number 6. Now this word, if you struggle with pronouncing this word, if all you can do is get this vowel syncope pronunciation in your repertoire, if you change from a 4-syllable word to a 3-syllable word, you're going to sound much more native-like. Because this word is comfortable. Don't look at the spelling here. The spelling will lead you astray. It's not comfortable. That is not the most common, the most natural pronunciation. Native speakers are saying comfortable, comfortable, comfortable. 3 syllables. Number 7, now this is, you probably learned, Wednesday. Okay, that one's very common. 2 syllables there, although it looks like Wednesday. But no one pronounces that. So 100% of the time, unless a speaker is trying to be funny or make a joke, they're going to pronounce it as 2 syllables, Wednesday. Wednesday. That's just the pronunciation. Number 8, separate. As an adjective, it's not separate. Separate. That's not the most natural pronunciation here. It's 2 syllables, separate. Convenient. Okay, 3 syllables. It's not convenient. Convenient. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's convenient. 1, 2, 3. Convenient. Average. Not average. Average. Omelet. not omelet. Omelet. That's the most common native-like pronunciation. Basically. Basically or basically. I think most people pronounce it as 3 syllables, basically, not basically. I mean, you can on this one, but I think basically is the most common. So 12 words that fall under group number 1, where the vowel is almost always dropped. Now let's look at group number 2. Now here the vowel might be dropped. Some of these words are in transition where the pronunciation is changing over time. You might have some people that feel very strongly about, I want to pronounce this word in this way. They have preferences, that's fine. So I'm showing you here, this is the way that I think I most likely pronounce these words. So here you're going to see a lot of the vowel syncope pronunciation, but just know some native speakers might use the full pronunciation with these words. So if you are speaking with a native speaker and you hear them say word number 1, favorite, and they say it as 2 syllables, favorite. That's how I have it here. But maybe you like to pronounce it as favorite, favorite. It's my favorite candy, favorite. But you want to sound more natural, you want to adopt the pronunciation that native speakers are using, and everybody around you is saying favorite, then you should adopt that as well. Just go with the flow of what people around you are saying. Number 2, family. That's probably the way I pronounce it. You can also say family as 3 syllables. That one can go either way. Number 3, interested. Interested. I typically pronounce this as 3 syllables, interested. But you might hear native speakers say interested as 4 syllables. I think that's less common, but again, it might depend on where you live right now. But I pronounce it as 3 syllables, interested. Camera. 2 syllables. I think that's much more common than camera as 3. Try to pronounce it as 2. Camera. Catholic. Okay, 2 syllables there, Catholic. You might hear someone say Catholic, Catholic. But I think the 2-syllable pronunciation is much more natural and more common, Catholic. Several. 2 syllables. You might hear someone say several, several, but I think several as 2 syllables is more common. Number 7, this word is fun. I use both. I use the full pronunciation and the vowel syncope pronunciation. It depends on who I'm speaking to, how quickly I'm speaking, probably is what it is. I just use the full pronunciation there. So the first one you'll see is probably, vowel syncope, probably, 2 syllables. You can also pronounce it as probably, probably. 3 syllables. It just depends on, who you're talking to. So listen for this one and just, notice how native speakers are pronouncing it. They might do the vowel syncope pronunciation here. Number 8, history. I think that's much more common than history. But, it's a toss-up. History. I think I use a 2-syllable pronunciation there. Number 9, especially. Okay, so here I prefer to use the non-vowel syncope pronunciation. I prefer to pronounce every syllable, especially. Though you could use vowel syncope here, and that sounds like especially, especially. But for whatever reason, I prefer to say especially most of the time. So I'm using the full pronunciation there. Naturally. I think that's the more natural pronunciation instead of naturally, naturally, naturally. Generally, 3 syllables, not generally, 1, 2, 3, 4, generally. And delivery or delivery. This one can go either way. Here I've shown you the non-vowel syncope pronunciation, delivery. 1, 2, 3, 4. Delivery versus delivery. 3 syllables. That one can go either way, but I think I probably pronounce this word more often like delivery as the 4 syllables. So again, 12 words here that may or may not follow vowel syncope, and of course there are plenty of other words out there that might follow this, and it just, again, the spelling is never going to change. It's just the pronunciation that changes. So you have to be listening and paying attention to what you hear, not how the word is spelled, right? Vowel syncope only happens in spoken English. So it's going to be challenging, but you'll hear it. Pick a few words that you want to listen for and just see if you can hear that in the speech of a native speaker. And then copy the way that they pronounce it if you're not sure which one to use. All right, so we're at about 1 hour right now. So we're on our last tip. And here's where we get into practice tips. So this is a tip for both stress and rhythm. And I want to give you some things that you can do right now to practice your stress and rhythm, and these are all free. My first tip is using a metronome when you practice. Now, if you're not sure what a metronome is, this is a picture of an actual traditional metronome, a real metronome. This white little arm just goes back and forth, tick, 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 tick. So a metronome just keeps time. It just keeps the beat, tick, 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 tick. You can purchase a real metronome, or you can use online metronomes for free. So don't buy one if you don't have one right now. Just go to a website and use a free one. There's also metronome apps that could be free, so you don't need to pay for this one. And what you're doing with the metronome is you're having something keep the beat for you. So a metronome is going to beat one. You're going to tell the metronome how fast you want it to beat, maybe 60 beats per minute. That's how metronomes are measured. It's how many clicks or how many beats occur in 1 minute. So 60 beats per minute is 1 beat per second. So you might want to start there. You can play with it and see what goes faster or slower. This is a good website. Now, I think if I click this link, nope. I don't think you cannot see that link, so that's okay. We will not kind of go for that website, but that's the website here that you're going to see, musica.com/metronome. Hold on 1 second because my screen just now changed. Hold on. I did something weird here. We've got some fun things to do and it's... Okay, that is good enough, I think. Oh no. All right, so things look a little bit different now. I apologize for that. It's because I clicked out of my PowerPoint presentation and it made the ratio look weird. So hopefully you can still see me and still see my PowerPoint. So I'm not going to click on this again because I'm not quite sure what will happen. But here is the website that you can go to for a free metronome. And we'll practice this together so you can kind of, and what I'll do is I'm just going to clap to be the metronome, right? So now we can't see the metronome there, but the metronome will keep the beat for you. And there are two main ways to use a metronome. Okay, so the first way when you're practicing with a metronome is to set a beat, maybe 60 beats per minute, maybe 100 beats, just kind of play with it. And every beat, when you're practicing, let's say you're going to practice the word comfortable. Let's say that you typically use the 4-syllable pronunciation, comfortable, 1, 2, 3, 4. But you want to adopt the more natural 3-syllable pronunciation, comfortable, comfortable. But it's really hard for you to do. You keep doing the four syllables. So say this word to a metronome. And when you first start practicing a new word or a new phrase, every beat, go ahead and say a syllable on every beat. It's not the most natural pronunciation, right? This is not how American English is actually spoken, but it will help you to get used to pronouncing comfortable as 3 syllables. So here's your clap as if this is the metronome. Okay, so you just got to keep clapping or keep the metronome going. You can hear that beat. Comfortable, 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 comfortable. So every time I clapped, I said a syllable. But that's not how the word is pronounced because English has stressed syllables and unstressed syllables. So if I do comfortable, every syllable is stressed. Every syllable was the same length, but we don't want that. So once you're comfortable with your 3-syllable pronunciation, now use the metronome in the second way to practice with it, which is every time you have a clap or a beat, only the stressed syllables get that beat, and then you have to squeeze in the unstressed syllables between the beats. So in the word comfortable, the first syllable, comf, has stress. The other 2 syllables are not stressed. So every time I clap or you have a beat of the metronome, you're going to say that comf syllable. And then dribble. The other 2 syllables, you have to squeeze in between the beats. So it forces you to go fast. It forces you to use the correct rhythm if you want to maintain the beat with that metronome. So I'm going to go really slowly. So every time I clap, I'm going to say the syllable comf, 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 comfortable, 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 comfortable. Those 2 syllables, the second 2 syllables, had to happen in between the beat, right? So you have to maintain that beat. So that's what's great about using a metronome is it forces you to maintain the beat and you can't stop because that metronome just keeps clicking. So that's the much more natural way to practice, that every time you hear that beat, a stressed syllable gets the beat. Let's make sure I can forward. Okay, good. So I'll practice this again with you using some sentences now. So these sentences I've chosen on purpose for the amount of content words and function words, and I want to force them to stick to a beat. Now, so it's not the most natural way because of course American English isn't said to a beat, but it's a good way to practice to force you to unstress and reduce function words because you have to squeeze those words between the beats. So let me show you here what we're going to do. You have 3 content words, take, dog, and walk. Now every time, and I have the same words 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, take, dog, walk, etc. 5 times. But you'll see that these sentences get longer and longer. There's more and more syllables that you have to say. However, I'm not adding any content words. So every time I say this sentence and I add another function word, I'm still going to say it in the same amount of time. Every time I clap my hand, I'm going to say take, dog, walk. Take, dog, walk. Take, dog, walk. Every time, every sentence. Now, these little purple words, for, fora, the, al, the, fora, these are your function words and they're going to be reduced. You have to reduce them in order to squeeze them between the beats because the beats aren't going to stop. This is the reductions that will happen. For will reduce to fur. A will reduce to a. The will reduce to the. And I'll will reduce to all. Okay? So listen for these reductions, and you can do this with me. Here's the beat. So every time I clap, you're going to say a word take, dog, walk, and then you'll have one beat where you rest, right? Because the beats happen in groups of 4. And this sentence, I've chosen only has 3 content words, so you have a 4th clap or a 4th beat that you will rest and join back in on beat number 1 when it occurs again. All right, so do this with me now. Clap along with me. So every time we clap, we're going to say those content words. Here we go. Take, dog, walk. Take, dog for walk. Take, dog for a walk. Take the dog for a walk. I'll take the dog for a walk. Okay, so every time I clapped, I said a function word, I said a stressed word or syllable, and the unstressed words or the reduced words had to fit between the beats. So if you have a metronome going, it keeps you honest, it keeps you on the beat. So there's a video of this sentence rhythm. I have 2 videos specifically where we work on maintaining clapping to a beat. You also can get practice with this specific activity in English Pro if you enjoy it, but this is a great way to help you with your rhythm. Now again, you can do the same thing using a metronome. You can with clapping, which I just demonstrated for you. This might be more challenging because you'll probably slow yourself down because it's going to be hard, but you must keep the beat. So you must keep that beat. Don't let yourself slow down. And the last thing that you can do, if stress and rhythm is still really challenging for you to get, you're still struggling with it, you can use correct phrasing or pausing or thought groups to help your listeners understand you better. Okay, so I do have videos on how to use thought groups on YouTube as well. But here are 3 ways that using the correct thought group, let's say you can't pronounce a certain vowel or a certain consonant, it's really challenging, you can't get that syllable stress, you can't get that reduction, that's going to be okay as long as you kind of follow the correct phrasing that a native speaker is listening for. It's going to really help them kind of chunk the information that you've said and understand each section, each chunk, or each thought group more appropriately. So one way to think about this is when saying phone numbers. So this is a typical phone number in America, in the United States, and the way that phone numbers are read out loud in the United States, they're read like this: 530-555-8944. You have your first 3 numbers, your second 3 numbers, and then your last 4 numbers. And there's definite pauses between 530, pause, 555, pause, 8944. That's what native speakers are listening for. That's how they identify phone numbers. If I change my thought groups, but still maintain the pronunciation, it's going to be so confusing. 5305, 558, 944. A native speaker would be very confused because that's not the phrasing that they're used to when listening for phone numbers. Same thing with sentences here. So to help you to help that person comprehend you better, if you have something that's written, you can follow the punctuation that you see to help you know where to pause. So this is a very complex instruction that you might get from a doctor's office, right? Telling you very important information. Now, if I were to read this to you and tell you this, and you're just listening to me. I'm the doctor, and I'm giving you instructions on how to use your medication, and I don't give you the correct pauses. Even for a native speaker, it's going to be so challenging to understand. First, you should take the prescribed medication lisinopril 10 milligrams once daily in the morning, preferably at the same time each day. Additionally, start taking atorvastatin 20 milligrams each night before bed. Blah, 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 blah. So hard to understand. Let me just add some pauses here where you see commas and periods and give you the correct pausing and the chunking so you can understand me better. First, you should take the prescribed medication, lisinopril, 10 milligrams once daily in the morning, preferably at the same time each day. Additionally, start taking atorvastatin 20 milligrams each night before bed. Okay, maybe that second reading was a little bit easier to understand, and all I did was just kind of insert pauses where they should be to help your listener comprehend you better. And then phrasing and pausing and thought groups are so important to conveying the correct meaning in a sentence. So we have this sentence here. Maria said the student is asleep. Now, I can say this two different ways and give you two different meanings here. Maria said the student is asleep. So in that way, the student is talking. Maria said the student is asleep. So that would be the correct pausing that you would give if that was what you wanted to say. That was the meaning of that sentence. But if you change the pausing to this, Maria said the student is asleep. Maria said the student is asleep. Now Maria is the one who's talking, right? So this is tricky because there's no commas there to tell you which way this sentence should be written. I did that on purpose. But just the way that I said it out loud, just the way that I did my pausing and my intonation, you understood what meaning was supposed to be there. So that's one way. If stress and rhythm is still really hard for you, think about pausing and using thought groups appropriately so that native speakers can maybe understand you better, even if your pronunciation isn't spot on yet. Okay, so we are about at an hour and 15 minutes, so we're a little bit heavy on our time, and you know what? I still cannot see my chat. I'm still learning how to use YouTube Lives, so let me see if I can figure it out right now. So go ahead, put your questions in the chat right now. If I can figure out really quickly how to find it without accidentally ending my live stream, I will be able to answer your questions, but I have a feeling, let me just see. Yeah, I'm scared I'm going to press the wrong button and it's not going to work. So let's just pretend that I have the Q&A section open. And unfortunately, I won't be able to see your questions right now. So I apologize for that. I will answer all of your questions in the comments. I'll see them in the chat. You can also wait until the live stream is over in just a few minutes and ask your question as a comment there too. But I will be able to see the chat once everything has been published and processed on YouTube. So I really apologize for my blanking on how to do YouTube Lives right now. But hopefully you can still ask your questions as a comment or put them in the chat right now. While you're thinking of your questions, let's just do a quick summary of what you guys learned today. So rhythm and stress this topic is huge. You know, there's so much that I could have talked about today. So I really tried to boil it down to just 5 things that I think will help make the biggest difference for you. So the first thing you learned about was that stress is up to the speaker, that there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to stress in American English, in spoken American English. But there are some guidelines that you can follow for typical stress patterns. Content, and you learned about content words versus function words. Those are the words that tell you where stress is going to go and how it's all going to play out. That's the foundation of stress and rhythm in English. Tip number 2, we talked about reductions in spoken English, and that's the most important part when we're talking about stress. It's de-stressing and reducing words. It's not adding more stress to the stressed words, right? Usually, for most non-native speakers, in order to sound more natural, you're going to want to focus on de-stressing words more. So reductions will help you with that. Tip number 3, we talked about when to break these guidelines when you want to shift stress for emphasis, and we practiced some specific cases when you might do that. Tip number 4, we talked about the other words in English that can be reduced through the process of vowel syncopy. So this is also a great way to make your speech sound much more natural and kind of adopt that native-like pronunciation for some really common words. So listen for vowel syncope in the pronunciation of the speech of American English speakers and try to copy the most common one that you hear in your region. And tip number 5, we talked about practice techniques, about using a metronome that you can use for free online, or clapping to keep the beat, and then also using phrasing and pausing to help you in the meantime if it's still just so hard for you to get this rhythm down right. If you can at least pause in the appropriate parts in your speech, the appropriate times, that will help native speakers to understand you very well. Again, I apologize that I can't see your questions, and that's just my fault, and I will do better during the next live stream next month. And interestingly, I also lost my final slide, which was a thank you slide, the most important one. So I don't know why. Again, it's not here. It's telling me this is the final slide of my PowerPoint, but I had one more slide. So that slide also had my contact information. So let me just tell it to you now. You can find me on YouTube, which you already have. My website is the name of my company, San Diego voiceandaccent.com. Everything is all spelled out. I'm also on Instagram at San Diego Voice and Accent with underscores between each of the words. I'm also on Reddit. If you like to use Reddit, I post videos there as well, and the subreddit is called American Accent. And then my email address, if you have questions, it's my first name, Julie, and then my and then the name of my company, San Diego voiceandaccent.com. All right, everybody. So thank you for sticking with me to the end. Again, I apologize for any of the technical difficulties here, but I'll be looking for your questions in the comments and in the chat. I really hope you found this valuable. Again, there's so much that we could talk about when discussing rhythm and stress, but hopefully you've walked away with some tips that you can start using right now, some techniques right now to help your rhythm and stress to improve. And I'll make an announcement for the next live stream class, which will be in about a month. I'll post that on YouTube and I'll put out a video so you'll know. But the topic will be on intonation. So my top 5 tips for perfect intonation. So I hope you will join me then as well. But until then, happy practicing and good luck with everybody, and I'll see you next month. All right, bye-bye.